That's a great question. I think I would still be, there are certain things that happen to us, experiences, and we focus on them, the loss of a child, and then our communication of whatever that experience is or was, the wound from it is over here. A lot of them are addictions and substance abuse and anger and bullying and suicide and that. I think I don't drink, I don't do drugs, I don't do any of that stuff, but anger has for sure been, it would have eaten me alive. It would have absolutely eaten me alive. And I think I would have gotten to the point where, depression, despair, just one more thing taken away from me would have gotten me, and I wouldn't have cared. I would not have taken it out on anybody, but I would have just kind of went quietly away. And
everyone, welcome back to Living the Next Chapter. I have a gentleman on my screen, and I've had him on Dad's Space. Now he's here on Living the Next Chapter to talk about his books, his writings. If you know someone who is struggling in the area of grief, finding purpose after losing someone's very significant to you or to a loved one, or you just know somebody would really benefit from today's conversation, please share this episode, because Dorian is here to talk about his story, and I am thrilled to have him back. He has a heart for people. He has a heart for helping you through your path of grief, and he's got a story that will touch your heart. So Dorian, I'm so happy to have you on Living the Next Chapter to talk about your books. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. And again, Dave, you and I have such a good time having these conversations that I'm honored to be on here just to go back and forth and visit about this. It's an interesting thing to say, yeah, I'm an author, because, I've always said, I wanted to write a book, and that this is one where no one ever wants to write a book about this. And what it is it's a memoir about losing my son almost 7 years ago, maybe this year. And he went back in 2017, he went for a hike. We live next to the mountains, and he had hundreds of miles on his boots. He used to just getting out there and just hiking, and he was a mountain goat. He would just go and go, and he would never ask me if I wanted to go for a hike, because he knew that he would have to either drag me along or carry me out, one of the two, and it wasn't good for him. But he left on Thursday before Memorial Day weekend, and it's about 1:00. He had a 10-week-old pup with him, and they were inseparable. And so he had her with him, and where they went hiking, there's a river that goes right down the valley. And so we parked there, and there's a trail that takes you, or you cross the river on a bridge and that, but you go all the way to the top of this mountain, this ridge, and you could see forever. And the last text I got from him said, "This is a beast of a hike, but talk about a view." And I tried to reach back out to him saying, what does that mean? What, is it long? Is it steep? Is it, never did get a hold of him again. And so, it's starting to get dark, and he didn't come home. Well, there's a valley up there where on one side of the valley, there's a trail, and then you have to kind of go across the hillside to get up to where you want to be. That's on the west side. On the east side, there's no trail, and it gets really steep. Down as you get closer to the river, the willows are nasty. There's no trail along the hillside because the river's right there. It was raging, and so we have no idea what happened. We don't know if we don't know if his pup got too close. We don't know what happened. And so when he didn't come home, I went and reached out to law enforcement, just saying, "Hey, I'm going to go look for him. What happens if I can't, or if I find him, I won't have cell service, any of that." Got search and rescue involved. looked all day on Friday, Saturday morning, just before noon, they found him in the river. And I can tell you that that was one of the longest and most helpless and hopeless times of my entire life. That was, oh my gosh, so many things happened. So much help was there. So many lessons were learned. And yet to have a traumatic experience like that is, you can't even describe it. And it sounds weird that the moment of the most peace came when they said, okay, we found it. Yes, this is not the outcome we wanted, but at least I knew what I was going to deal with after that. Because the struggle is when there's the uncertainty of everything. You have no idea. And I couldn't even get involved with the search really, because, if I walk over this way, I'm going to be stepping on, footprints and things like that. I just felt almost felt embarrassed because I couldn't even help. And so, a year to the day, even before that, I felt like we needed I wanted to do something in honor of my son, not just because he's my son, but give good examples of how he is. And because I kept hearing all these stories about that I didn't hear either from kids he went to school with or parents of kids he went to school with, saying, you have no idea what your son helped my son or daughter through or with, and so a year to the day, there was 10 of us, and we took this memorial hike up to the top. We took one of his lacrosse helmets, and one of my friends made a plaque, and it had his last text on it. But we also took a little container, put some pens and pencils and some paper in there with, I wrote on the outside, what did it take for you to get up here? What did it take for you to make this hike? And so some people would, how vulnerable they are when they get up top. It's like, it took courage, but it also, I learned, as I'm walking up this, I learned about forgiveness, and I learned about this. And I mean, it's amazing. But one of my dear friends who went on the hike with us, her sister had just graduated from a university in literature nonfiction with an emphasis on memoirs. How ironic is that? It's not ironic. It's the fact that I kept asking my friend Belinda if she would be open to helping me with this book, because after something like that happens, your mind breaks. There's no way you can sit down and write things that make sense in a way that Danielle did, who is Belinda's sister. And she kept asking, hey, will you asking me if I can help write that book? She's a rock star. So the first thing I say is that if somebody is looking to write a book, if you feel like you don't have what it takes to write it that way, but you have the story, you have the idea, you have different things like that, co-author. Because that's what we did. We took hours and hours going through what happened, and it took a while to write it, but we were able to collaborate and put this together in a way that she wrote like I never could. And so in the book, what it is it's first person for me walking up that hill, and I'm going through what am I supposed to learn from this hike? It's not just a memorial hike for me. It's what am I learning? What do I need to remember? What do I need to know about the importance of this hike? And then we revert back to the search, where they bring in helicopters. Certain things happen, and it's firsthand experience of me watching everything happen and be completely out of control and not knowing what to do, what to say, But then it also we put in little anecdotes about Bailand, my son, and saying, this is who he is, and this is why it's important to tell his story. Now, during the time that we are um, writing this, Danielle and I, we reach out to each other, and I did more than she did because I'm saying to myself, I'm supposed to be healing. I'm supposed to be figuring myself out. I'm supposed to be wondering how in the world to get through this trauma, how to deal with my own grief, how to deal with, not moving on, but moving forward in my life and finding happiness without feeling guilty. That's a huge part of it, right? But once we were finished and we published it, there were certain individuals who they would read it and they would come back and they would say to me, first of all, I don't know how you put it together that well. And yet, as I read it, there were certain things that I was able to like reenact in my mind about something that made me angry. I've been frustrated for years on because I'm listening or reading what happened to you, and all of a sudden they have this aha moment saying, oh, that's what it looks like. That's why I'm angry. And so they're able to work through their stuff while reading through this story that was written. And I'm absolutely honored that they can do that, especially men, especially some men would, they wouldn't pick up that book and read it just because they don't have the time or that's not the type of book they would read. I didn't want to, but something kept pushing me. I knew that it needed to be in audiobook form as well. And I kept having people say, you need to read it. I'm like, that is going to kill me. That will do me in because it's not, and I don't know if you've edited certain things like books or even like articles or whatever that you're listening to. But it's not the fact of I get tired of hearing my own voice. It's a fact of reliving it over and over and over again as I'm editing it, right? However, the interesting part is the day that I decided that I would do it, I had two people, including Danielle, reach out and say, you need to be the one who does it. You need to tell the story. And I'm like, oh. But about that point, all of a sudden I feel Bailand, whom I talk out loud to him all the time. And I just have, words come into my mind. And so I know he's there. I know he's sharing things with me. And I just had the feeling of him saying, it's okay, Dad. We got this. We'll do it. We can do this. I'm grateful that I did. So I did it, ended up having to go through a really good cleaning process of it. But it's on Audible now as well. And that's another proud moment. Having that book and it being on Audible is a very proud moment just because of the fact of being able to share the story, And I think it's important that people know that no matter what you go through, the important part is to be able to tell your story. And to me, it doesn't matter if it's in written form, if you do it in a poem, if you do it in writing a song, if you do it in art, if you do it, however, if you tell your story, you do it the way that you need to tell your story. But it's important that people know that other people have gone through stuff. I think it's also important to know that when somebody looks at us and we're having a normal conversation here back and forth, we're going to get into some other, fun things in that. But when somebody looks at you and says, what is wrong with you? I mean, you act like you've never been through anything, look at you, how, happy you are and stuff. No, almost 7 years ago, I lost my son, and I look at him dead in the eye and say, and that's been one of the easier things I've dealt with in the last 7 years. And people are like, oh my gosh, you know, but what it does is it says that somebody can and will go through horrific things. And I'm not saying I'm special. I'm not saying I'm unique, that I've gone through more than most or whatever. I'm not that guy. And yet, all the things that I've learned that I've used to help me in the process of healing, I get to turn and be vulnerable and authentic and say, come sit with me. We don't have to talk. Come sit with me, and you can get whatever you need or want, because I'm not going anywhere. I get it. And it doesn't have to be the loss of a child, the loss of a loved one. It could be anything else, you know? But we've got to tell our story. And especially the thing that I'm learning, and the thing that I've got some people who are helping put this together, because I think the most important part is to have a visual of how to tell your story. Meaning, when somebody tells their story, most of the time they're pretty sheepish about certain details about, I was homeless here, I threw out of my car, I did this or whatever. And all of a sudden you look at this and say, okay, let's look at how high you climbed up that mountain, not how far from the top are you still. How high did you climb? And we need to address that and go all the way back to the bottom and say, you know what? You're amazing. Look at all the things that you learned. Let's talk about that. What are you grateful for? What can't be taken away from you taking that hike up that mountain that far, right? And that's a beautiful thing, because people look at this and say, because I don't want anybody to tell their story to me as a victim, that they were painted as a villain, whatever. You tell your story, but we're gonna look at different things that make it so that you're not a victim or a villain, that you were doing the very best you could while hiking that.
Yeah.
Right.
So for you, Dorian, like, if you hadn't have written this book at all, never wrote anything about your experience, never put pen to paper, where do you think you would be right now had you never done this? Where would you be?
That's a great question. I think I would still be, there are certain things that happen to us, experiences, and we focus on them, the loss of a child, and then our communication of whatever that experience is or was, the wound from it is over here. A lot of them are addictions and substance abuse and anger and bullying and suicide and that. I think I don't drink, I don't do drugs, I don't do any of that stuff, but anger has for sure been, it would have eaten me alive. It would have absolutely eaten me alive. And I think I would have gotten to the point where, depression, despair, just one more thing taken away from me would have gotten me. And I wouldn't have cared. I would not have taken it out on anybody, but I would have just kind of went quietly away and went away.
Yeah. Yeah. So what about what was your family? How did they respond to the book, to you sharing the story? Like, this is a very personal thing to write about.
Very, very. Right. I haven't had much support from my family at all. Yeah.
Really?
And that's part of the issue when I say, losing my son has been one of the easier things. And so, I walked away from everybody. I don't say much about this, but I've walked away from everybody because you could only handle so much of walking into a room and not knowing mentally, emotionally, even physically, if you're going to get jumped on, And so the support is, even while I'm, there in the middle of it, there was no support. There was no, I'm there by myself, I mean, my dad would come up and stuff just to check on, but there was nobody who I could lean on and for any support at all. You know, I think that's why you know how strong you are when there's no other choice that you have. You know, and sometimes we get tired of being strong, but I think our strength is important to show other people, even if it is just, you know, remaining true to ourselves, saying, if I had not gone through this, I would not be able to have the experiences that I am having, like being able to have this conversation with you, right? And I can say that, it was a struggle. Um, so I'd been divorced for 5 years when Bailand had passed. And there were certain things where, he was told how I should be doing things, how I shouldn't be doing things, all of that stuff, right? And so it's hard to feed into those things, especially when he gets told over and over and over and over and over again, right? But he sees how things are, comes back up, sees me for me, and he had given all of everybody else's responsibility that he was carrying around back to them. If that makes sense. He took off his backpack, threw all the rocks that belonged to everybody else, and he was beautiful. He was like amazing. He was the person who I always knew he was, saw him as. And so we were able to sit down and just, are we good? Yeah. And work through things. And yet the relationship that he and I have now, even though I can't see him, stuff like that, I know he's always there. I know that there are certain things where I could have only experienced with him this way. It's horrible. I mean, that's a tough thing to try to explain to somebody, because at 19, I mean, shoot, he had the whole world, in his hands. He could go do whatever he wanted to. And yet the beauty that I have found in this traumatic experience could only have been found. Like, I know I've shared this with you, but as we're hiking up the mountain, okay, there's certain places where it gets really steep, it gets really rocky, it gets, the grass and bushes are over the trail, so sometimes you can't see it. So if there's a situation where we lose our footing and we go down and we hit our knee and it hurts and we're bleeding and we're thinking, why in the world did we go on this hike? This is horrible. This is just stupid. Oh my gosh. You think you're going to need stitches? No, but it hurts. I hate this. But at that very moment, the grass and the bushes that are overgrown, because you're down there, you turn and you look and you make eye contact with a baby deer that you would have never, ever seen, or a little spring or a little bird's nest or something like that, that every time you look at that scar on your knee now, you can revert back to, right? I'm grateful for all of the people who were involved with that search. I'm grateful that there was no one let up. I'm grateful for the connections that I still have with some of these people. Even though we don't see each other very often, it's still the eye contact we make when we are in the same store or whatever. It's just like, okay, if I ever need anything, I got everything I needed right there. Just knowing that they've got my back, right? So where would I be? I would not have the full picture of what really is important in life either. Because everything that everybody thinks is important is what we can touch and feel and taste and smell and all of that. And I'm realizing that the most important things are things like this: our conversations, our connections, our relationships. To look at somebody and say, you know what? I'm so grateful that you and I can have this conversation. Do you know how freaking awesome you are and how much I need you? Because if we share that with somebody, that means that we're outside of ourselves, letting them know how important they are to us. And they need that because most of the time we don't think we are,
Yeah.
you know?
So one thing I find interesting about you, Dorian, you told me when we first met that you have, for your name, you have your letters of your name, Dorian. There's something special about each of those letters. And you know what? I don't hear this very often. And it made me leave our conversation going, I've never put any thought or effort into that for myself. So you've challenged me. But for you, your name, if you each letter of your name meant something, you have it all spelled out. Can you explain that? Because I love when you shared that with me.
Yeah. Okay. And I'm going to take a step back so that I kind of preface it. So where that concept came from, if that's okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So I mentioned that Bailand was with me. Bailand stayed with me through high school. So I was staying with my parents because they were getting older and they needed help. And so he stayed with me. And so I saw him. I saw him as he is. I saw all the things that, and heard about all the things that he did after he passed, and that amazing kid. I spoke at his funeral, and I don't know how I did because you're still in the this isn't reality, and you're still, supported by something. But I wanted to give him the send-off that I felt like he deserved. So in First John, in the Bible, it talks about why we love Christ because he loved us first. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
But I also said, but this is why we love Bailand is because he loved us first and was kind to us first and was compassionate and understanding and accepting and tolerant. And I left it there and I started looking into all the things that I referenced about Bailand and realized that all of these things are virtues. They're not values, they're not characteristics, they're not attributes, they're virtues. Okay. And so I went and spoke with a counselor friend of mine. She's not the one who I worked through everything with because she lost her daughter at 19. I didn't want to, her to have to relive all of that. But I asked her, I said, if in your counseling, in your sessions, your conversations, if virtue such as courage and honor and integrity and happiness and gratitude, if those are part of your conversation, how does that affect a conversation? She said that would change the whole dynamic of counseling, period. And I said, really? And she's like, yeah, because fear and doubt and shame and guilt cannot be in the same room if you're talking like that. If you're authentic, if you speak your truth, no matter what it is, then those things cannot be there. And it allows you to be you and vulnerable, right? And beautiful. So I said, oh my gosh. And she's like, time out. Go put a visual together so that I can see what's going on in your mind because my mind will go, just like huge map, right? So what I did is I went and started my virtue journey, so to speak, started doing a lot of research. And I broke it down into 10 different core virtues. Okay. And what I did with that is that it was wisdom and justice and fortitude and self-control and love and positive attitude and hard work and integrity and gratitude and humility. And I took those and I broke them down to say, what are the elements of each one of those? For example, if we look at wisdom, a lot of times when they say, oh, wisdom, we've got to go find that old guy who lives in the cave with a long beard, who he knows the meaning of life, right? That's not what it is. If we look at the elements of wisdom, it's not just logic and reason, but it's also the creativity and imagination and the wonder. But it's also the intuition, the spirituality, the and beauty, all of these different things that make up what we consider a person with wisdom to have and to be. And we have all of those inside of us already. Some people may say, that's not me. Well, I promise you it is. You just may have a smaller capacity, or you may be creative in a different way. So if an accountant says, I'm not creative, tax time you are, right? The rest of the time, it's like, you're absolutely right. But, tax shelters and all that stuff, you've got to get creative sometimes. So we look at that and say, what are the elements of each one of these? So what I did for this visual to share with her is I went to the periodic table of elements, got rid of all the elements, and I color coordinated it based on each virtue. And I put all the elements based on each virtue in this. So it looks like the periodic table of elements. And so when people look at that, they're like, oh, I'm like, no, I call it the chemistry of virtue. Because if you think about it, we can put together a virtue formula. And what that does is it allows us to say, who am I? And we can define ourselves by certain things that are already inside of us. We just have to wake it up. It has nothing to do with anything outside, including our last name. Because there could be discrepancies, there could be things that, women change their last name, so they go from their maiden name to their married name. There are certain things that can always be changed. Maybe they don't, but they can. And so if we define ourselves by specific things, then that's an amazing aspect of it. Even if we look at a situation and say, how do I want that situation to be? And what do I need to go into that situation to be that way? Okay. So I'll say this last part and then I'll explain what you're talking about, because I love it too. Okay. So if somebody says, give me an example, I say, you know what? Let's talk about patience. Well, I'm not patient. And I say, oh, good. Because we're going to go over to this store. I don't care what store. We're going to get behind the oldest, slowest person. And when we do that, we're going to be patient on purpose. Okay. And people are like, oh boy, here we go. So we go over and we get behind this person, whether they're in a motorized cart, whether they're walking, whatever. But all of a sudden, we're doing it on purpose. We're not going to go around. The purpose is for us to be there behind that person. And all of a sudden they look at us and say, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. I'm old. I'm slow. I'm achy. Patience kicks in. But not just patience, acceptance, kindness, compassion, understanding, tolerance, happiness, authenticity, vulnerability. I mean, so many things wake up inside of us. And in that moment where if it was different, it could be so miserable, or we could make it that way. Right. And so we look at this and say, why would we do that? Well, if we look at it, as soon as we become and wake up that patience and the kindness and the compassion, we get this shot of oxytocin, dopamine, endorphins, all of these things that allow us and help us to be happy in a way that nothing else can, right? It's not just us. I mean, and maybe we have, 5 different people with us or whatever. Every single person gets that benefit because they're part of it. Not only that, but the person who we're being patient with gets a shot of that. Not only that, the people who are watching around us get a shot of it. And all of a sudden, maybe they were having a horrible day. Maybe they're just like, or if I don't find anything good, I'm just going to, go out and do whatever. All of a sudden they see that and they say, that's exactly what I need. Okay. We did that on purpose, but the ripple effect can go on forever, because at that moment, that person who said, if I don't see anything good happening today, they're not going to go out and pay it forward. That's not what this is. They're going to go out and they're going to say, I want to do that. I want to be that person. And so I'm going to wake up what I need, what I consider to be patient and kind and understanding in a different situation. And they're aware of their surroundings a lot more. And those things will show up. I give you my word, they show up out of nowhere, even if it's just getting a door, even if it's smiling at somebody, and somebody's like, oh, I saw you did that today, So what I did is, with all of these elements, I alphabetized them. And so, I take my name and I say, you know what? Let me define who I am, because this is who I know that I am. And as soon as I hit the door, going out in the real world, this is who I know I am. And I can be every minute of the day, no matter whether anybody is mean or rude, or if they're having a bad day and they kick me in the shin, I can still be this person. This is who I am. So I say D is for dignity, and O is for originality, and R is for respect. I is for individuality, A is for authenticity, and N is for nobility. So if you and I have a disagreement, I can step back and say, okay, there may be a situation here that I don't understand, and yet I can look at you and say, okay, help me to understand. I may still not agree with you, but I can still offer that respect that you have that opinion. Guess what? Respect's in my name. I can act authentically, and I can say, your opinion does not affect me, because authentically, this is who I am, and this is why I am, and this is why I think the way I do, and all of that. So I can look in any situation, I can offer you or me dignity. I can be authentic. I can offer respect. I can say, did I act with nobility in these situations? As soon as I come back from the outside world, hit the door to the house, I can say, is that who I was today? And I give you my word. When it comes down to it, if we view it like that, if we say, okay, because I yelled, that could define it as angry, right? If I went and got drunk and drove down the road because I didn't care, because I'm just like, what's the point? That could define me. But if I said, you know what? That's not who I am. But too many times we look at this and say, I don't know who I am. And so many times I hear, you need to know, you need to believe that you are enough. Enough what? So I also took the word enough and spelled it out. I don't remember everything is there, but I'm like, I am enough. And it's like E is for excellence, or endurance, or whatever the other E's are, right? And then N is for nobility. O is for this, and go down and say, you know what? It's a great place to start. So to go back over and to say, you know what is a mother? Fill in the virtues that go along with that. A father, a grandma, a grandpa, a home, a family. And even though your situation may not be that, that's what it can be.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah.
So if we say, in my family, it's not a great place, well, come back over here and saying, this is what I want my family to be. That's what I grew up in, but I also have the opportunity to say, this is what I want to be. And each one of my kids can be authentically who they are based on their name.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. It's a great pattern for all of us to consider. And I can see people listening right now looking at their name going, that my
Yeah,
name would mean
yeah,
much more if I do the exercise. It's going to mean more for
exactly.
me
And
because I say my name all the
yes,
time.
yes, yes, yes. And see, to me, it's when we first met, it's like, well, hi, Dave. Hi, David. How are you? Hi, Dorian. And that's what we
Yeah.
define ourselves by. That doesn't change. And so, see, to me, I love that. If parents or a teacher or whatever shows this child, this is not just pigeonholing them into this. It's just like, just remember who you are. On the
Yeah.
flip side, if there is somebody who has passed away, I did one for Bailand, and I took my time and said, who do I see him as? And the virtues that go along with him and who he became. What a great gift, or what a great way to remember somebody.
Yeah. I have to ask as
You
well,
know,
Dorian, Balin's name is so unique. Can you tell us, like, how did you land on Bailand for him? I love the name, by the way.
you know what? So when we first started looking, and that it was like, we shotgun different names and that, and somebody who beats you up when you're growing up, and we're not going with that name, even though
No, no,
that's
yeah,
a
yeah.
cool name, and um, we didn't want to go with family names and that. Well, my ex-wife, Ben's mom, looked at me and said, "You know what? Good, back then Bailey was a big hit and all of that." And so, but she looked at me and she said, I knew a guy who I went to high school with. And this is a very interesting story because comes full circle. Um, she said, his name is Bailand. And I'm like, wait a second. I like that. I don't know what it is, but I really like that. Right.
Yeah.
And so we went forward with it, and um, never was his nickname Bailey by any means. It was always Bailand. And so I had his mom had said he's such a good kid. I never knew, he was the one who was always standing up for somebody else, or was just very kind hearted, or very soft spoken, or whatever. I'm like, that's exactly who Baden is and was. So the interesting part is, I had talked to a few people before I found this out, that Baden was named after this kid. And somebody was looking at me and said, is his last name such and such? I have no idea what his last name is. And I said, I don't know. He went to high school. Da, da, da. I'm like, yeah. They're like, you want to talk about a good kid. You want to talk about a good guy. Anytime I see him, it's just we pick up where we left off. I'm like, oh my gosh. Well, fast forward. Where he is buried is not where I would have had him buried. I didn't want him buried there, but um, there's part in the book, it talks about how we decided and all of that, where he had buried in that. Lion went over, and the grass wasn't growing very well on his plot, and I'm just like, because I wanted to take care of it. And that, well, I was talking to this lady who, she was there and dropped her kids off, so that they could help move pipe and stuff in the cemetery to help it or to water the grass. Right, it's out close to the mountains and stuff. It's a little cemetery. Anyway, so as we're talking about things, she's like, okay, I said, I've done this, I've done this. She said, okay, I'll go make sure that I can get some, grass seed. We'll make sure that we'll do it along with you. I said, okay. I said something about Bailand. She's like, I'm sorry, what? And I said, she's like, who are you talking about? I said, my son Bailand. That's his name. She's like, my brother's name is Bailand. I said, wait a second. Did he go to this high school? Yeah, about this time he graduated this year. What she said. And I'm like, I said, I've heard he's just a damn good kid, just a good guy. She's like, you don't find any better. I'm like, my son Bailand was named after your brother.
Wow.
And
What?
yeah, and she's like,
Wow.
what? Yeah, that's what I thought too. And it made me, she's like, it's an honor to know that he was such, such a good kid named after my brother, who's such a good guy, you know, not a coincidence,
Yeah.
but I absolutely loved that connection. So it's interesting when somebody would hear his name, they'd be like, oh my gosh, that's, and I would hear other people named that, but it was never spelled the same. They would leave off a D or whatever. But it was always, there was no question about whether or not if you hear Bailand, if somebody else said his name, I always knew that something good behind it was on its way.
Yeah. Yeah. When I heard Balin's name originally, to me, because it has land at the end of it, right? To me, my initial thought was it was like a destination, like a place, like a city or a country. Bailand.
Right.
For me, that was like a place you go to. I'm going to go to Bailand. Like it sounds like a destination.
Yes.
And then when you go back to the text he sent you, he was at a destination when he sent you that text.
Yes, he was.
Right.
Yes,
and
he
then
was.
you took a walk to the destination where Bailand was. So to me, in my mind, everything is all about that. He himself, his name was a destination. And the book is a destination. The story is a destination.
Yeah.
It all comes back to me.
And you know what you do? I'm about ready to cry because it's such an honor that someone will talk about my son like that. And that's exactly right. And it's so my dad would always take my kids out, all four of them. We won't get into anything else about that, but so when Bailand would go there, he was the big brother, right? He was that big brother that like my other kids would smooth, rough, and drive him crazy and stuff like that. But he wouldn't ever really fight back or anything like that. And if they would start getting rowdy and that, he would just look at them and say, "Hey, just like this. Hey, guys." Sorry about that, Dave. I don't know what happened.
That's okay. No, it's fine.
Maybe I thought I said a really bad swear word or something, But he would just look at them and he would not raise his voice or anything. He would just say, like, "Hey, guys, time to settle down." And immediately, all of my kids would just go right down. And it was amazing to watch him be that big brother to do that. But we talk about, a destination that he was such a rock. He was such a good, strong person for other people to be around because he let them be that person.
Right.
So thank you for that. I mean, that's such a great way to explain it and stuff,
Yeah. That's just when I saw his name, I'm like, that's something special. It's a very unique and special name. So I love the story too, how that came full circle.
Yes.
It's amazing.
Yes.
So,
yes.
Okay. So Dorian, like before we go, I know we can buy your books on Amazon and follow you as an author there as well. You mentioned that people can connect with you through Facebook, for example.
Right.
Where do we go to reach out to you? Because I'm thinking there's going to be parents who are going to want to know more about you as an author, know more about you as a dad, and more about your story, and to celebrate Bailand as well. But as Facebook, where do we go to connect with you and all of that stuff as well?
Okay. So my page is just Dorian Johnson, and you'll see a picture of Bailand there. Well, no, you'll see me. Anyway, you're just Dorian Johnson. And that's my personal page. I post a lot of different things about defining ourselves and healing through different things in that. And if you've noticed, to go back and say, how much did we talk about the trauma that I've been through with that, because the healing aspect of virtue and all of this is so amazing that it not only heals, but it helps define us at the same time, right? So I post a lot about that kind of stuff and want to buoy people up and just say, you know what? I know you're going through some stuff. What do you need? What do you want? How can I help? I may understand that I don't understand. And that's the beautiful part of compassion, because it doesn't come from me, it comes through me. Right.
Right.
So if you go to Facebook and say, Dorian Johnson, I'm there. But I also started 2 groups. One of them is called A Day in the Life of Grief. I'll start with that one. A Day in the Life of Grief, which is, there's a lot of things that we post in there about grief, about how we're feeling, about different things like that other people can know somebody else is going through it or has gone through it, and all of a sudden they get streamed there. The other group that I started, and I cry every time I post something because it's always amazing, it's called Unsung Heroes. Okay. And what that is, we find different things in the world. We find amazing things. Even, it can go from somebody who jumps in a freezing river to go save somebody, all the way down to, I posted something about, 2 little kids who are sitting there and they have, 2 plates. One of them is upside down, and they open them up at the same time. And one kid has 2 pieces of apple and the other kid doesn't have anything. And all of a sudden you just watch. It doesn't matter if it's a boy or a girl. All of a sudden that kid realizes, here, you get one too.
Yeah.
So it's things like that. And it's finding good things that are happening in this world. And it's called Unsung Heroes.
Okay. Good.
So
we'll put links in the show notes for people to come and join those groups as well, and be in touch with you.
That'd be great. Yeah.
So where do we go from here, Dorian, too? Yeah.
Well, I just wanted to say, let's let everybody know that if they come and ask to join one of those groups, that Dave will give them $1 just for doing that.
Oh, gosh. There you go. Thanks, Dorian. That's so kind of you to offer up. My wife will be so thrilled. Yeah.
You're welcome. And everybody out there in whatever land, you're welcome. All right.
There you go. Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you.
So
I'm going to have to work extra shifts to do that. That's good.
To go forward with this, please reach out to me on Facebook. Please reach out to me. However, and I'd be more than happy to share, other things with you and how I made through whatever. There are days when it's tough to get through for me. And yet those days that are tougher are the days when somebody reaches out and says, can you give me just a little advice? Or we have something like this. And all of a sudden I get to share some of this stuff because I forget what it does for me along with everybody else and that. So, however it is, feel free to reach out.
I love it. Dorian, thank you for doing this. Thank you for doing the Dad Space podcast as well.
Yes, my pleasure.
It's great when you can meet someone in life that speaks life into people and takes a story that really could have a very sad and tragic ending for everyone, and you're finding a glimmer of hope. And, you share your story through the books, you share your story coming on a podcast like this. And I know somebody's listening to this today and they're struggling. So hearing your words and your outlook on life, I think is refreshing. So thank you so much for being a part of this story.
My honor, my pleasure.
Excellent. Everyone, all the information's in the show notes for you to go and connect with Dorian. I would appreciate if you do that and you let him know how meaningful his books are. Leave him a great review when you buy your book, wherever you purchase it, so that everyone knows how amazing this book is and how helpful it is. Please do that and let him know that you heard him on the podcast and send him a message of hope and thanks. Dorian, I really appreciate it. Thank you, man.
My pleasure.
thanks for being part of the podcast again. Appreciate you investing time in the show and you for listening this far. Thank you. One thing to keep in mind is we are looking for help and some support for the podcast. If you are able to help support our show, our little podcast show here, we can go over to livingthenextchapter.com and all the instructions will be there to help support the show. It takes about $30 to $40 a month to do this, just for the hosting and all of that other stuff that we pay for. But if the show is giving you any value and you're enjoying what's happening here, would love any kind of support that you can offer. That would be great. And you being here and sharing the show helps us grow. Helps us get great new authors on the show, connect with other listeners, and build community. So whatever you can do to share this show today, I really appreciate it. Thank you for being here for Living the Next Chapter, and I can't wait to share the next one with you. Talk soon. Have a great day.
Hey there, fellow parent. If you're anything like me, balancing screen time for our kids is a constant struggle. That's why I want to share a little secret with you, KidsPod. It's this amazing app I found that's packed with podcasts just for kids. Imagine stories, learning, and fun, all without the screen. It's been a game changer in our house, keeping my kids engaged and their imaginations running wild. And guess what? It's completely free. So download KidsPod today. Trust me, it's a decision you won't regret.